There was a time when meaning felt urgent, not always in a dramatic way, more like a quiet insistence running underneath everything. What does this lead to? What does this say about me? Why is this happening? Even in simple moments, there was a subtle pressure to understand, to interpret, to place experiences into some larger context that would make them make sense. I didn't question that habit. It felt responsible, like paying attention. But over time, I began to notice how tiring it was. Meaning had become another form of effort. Even when life felt calm, there was still an internal inquiry happening, a gentle interrogation of the moment. What am I supposed to learn from this? What does this reveal? Those questions were so familiar they felt natural, until they stopped appearing. Not all at once, not dramatically, they just began to fall silent. At first, the silence felt uncomfortable, like a conversation had ended too soon. I caught myself waiting for the follow-up question that never came, waiting for the interpretation that used to arrive automatically. But nothing filled the space, and life didn't collapse because of it. Moments still unfolded, events still happened, emotions still moved through me. They just weren't being framed anymore. Without constant questioning, experience feels less layered. Not shallow, just direct. A feeling arises, is felt, passes. No meaning extracted, no lesson pulled out. I didn't lose curiosity. I lost compulsion. There's a difference. Curiosity still appears when something genuinely asks for attention. But it doesn't attach itself to everything indiscriminately. Meaning used to hover over each experience like a task. Something that needed to be completed before the moment could be released. Now moments don't wait. They come and go freely. I've noticed how often meaning was used to stabilize uncertainty. If I could explain something, I could contain it. If I could understand why something happened, I could tolerate it. Without that habit, uncertainty feels more exposed. But it also feels lighter. I don't need to know what this moment means in order to be in it. That realization didn't arrive as insight. It arrived as exhaustion. I simply stopped asking. And when I stopped asking, nothing rushed in to replace the questions. There was no new framework, no deeper understanding, just life happening without commentary. This doesn't mean life feels meaningless. Meaning just isn't verbal anymore. It's atmospheric. It's in the way a moment feels complete without explanation. In the way experience doesn't ask to be translated. Meaning used to live in thought. Now it lives in presence. And presence doesn't speak. I used to believe that without interpretation, life would feel empty. That moments would flatten out into monotony. But they haven't. They've softened. Without the pressure to define, experiences don't harden into concepts. They remain fluid. A day doesn't need to represent anything. It doesn't need to add up. Can simply end. This has changed how I relate to confusion as well. Confusion used to feel like a problem, a sign that I hadn't understood something important yet. Now confusion feels like a natural state. Not knowing doesn't ask to be fixed. It just exists until it doesn't. There's a surprising peace in letting questions dissolve on their own. Not answered, not dismissed, just allowed to fade. I still think, I still reflect, but thinking no longer feels like a responsibility. If a question arises, it arises. If it doesn't, nothing is missing. The need to extract meaning was a way of controlling experience, of making sure nothing slipped past unnoticed. But nothing needs to be captured. Life doesn't require documentation. It requires participation. And participation doesn't come with explanations. When meaning stops asking questions, silence becomes trustworthy. Not because it contains answers, but because it doesn't demand them. I can sit with something unresolved without tension, without trying to turn it into insight. Resolution is no longer the goal. Understanding is optional. There's freedom in realizing that life can be lived without being decoded. That experience doesn't need subtitles. Moments are allowed to remain untranslated. And in that untranslated space, something relaxes. Not because clarity arrives, but because clarity isn't required. Meaning hasn't disappeared. It's just no longer interrogating me. It's no longer asking to be justified. It rests quietly in the background, like a scent in the air, unnamed, unmeasured, present. And that's enough. If this reflection met you where you are, you're already part of this space. You don't need to hold on to it, and you don't need to return. But if you do, these reflections will still be here,